Welcome to Echoes of Ihsan. You know, I love it when we get to go deep on specific texts, and today we're diving into one that you all requested, Sunan al Tirmidhi, Volume 2. It seems like you're really wanting to learn more about how to live as a Muslim, and I think we've got the perfect guide for that today.
Absolutely. This is one of the 6 major hadith collections for Sunni Islam, and it's chock full of the sayings and practices of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. It's almost like a combination spiritual and practical guidebook.
So diving into Volume 2 in particular, what kind of topics can we expect to find in this guidebook?
You name it. Prayer, charity, fasting, pilgrimage, marriage, death, and a whole lot more. It's super comprehensive.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack. I feel like we're about to go on an archaeological dig, unearthing these precious gems of wisdom.
Yeah.
So where do we even begin with a text this broad?
Well, since it covers pretty much every aspect of life as a Muslim, I think a good starting point would be zakat or charity. It pops up all over Volume 2, especially in chapters 26, 27, 28, 32, and 33.
Zakat is definitely essential, right? It's one of the 5 pillars of Islam. But I'm really interested in how this volume goes beyond just the basics. It seems to really dive into the nuances of giving.
For sure. It's not just about how much you give, but the source of that money, your intentions behind giving, and even how you go about giving it.
Okay, so there's a lot more to giving than meets the eye. Now, you mentioned the source of the money, and I know there's this concept of tayyib. Can you explain that for our listeners?
Yeah, so tayyib basically means your earnings have to be pure and lawful for your charity to be accepted. It's this reminder that even our finances are connected to our spirituality.
Wow. It really elevates the act of giving charity when you think of it like that. It's not just about helping others, but also purifying our own wealth in the process.
Exactly. And there's a beautiful hadith that illustrates this point. It compares a small act of charity from lawful earnings to a single date being nurtured in the hand of the most merciful. Imagine that even something as small as a date, when given sincerely and from a pure source, can grow into something larger than a mountain.
That's an incredible image. It really highlights how impactful even the smallest acts of giving can be when done with the right intention. Okay, so we've talked about the giver side of things. What about the people on the receiving end of charity? What does Volume 2 have to say about asking for help?
That's a great question. Self-reliance is super encouraged in Islam, and you can see that in chapters 29, 30, 63, and 64. There's this one hadith that compares begging to a labor that toils on a man's face, basically saying that it can be a burden, both physically and spiritually.
So even though Islam promotes taking care of each other, it also emphasizes the importance of trying to be self-sufficient whenever possible.
Exactly. It's all about finding that balance. It's recognizing that there are times when asking for help is unavoidable, like when you're in dire straits or approaching a ruler for assistance. But overall, we should aim to rely on ourselves as much as we can.
I see. So it's about maintaining dignity and personal responsibility while also acknowledging our limitations.
Yeah.
Okay, but there's one thing in chapter 25 that really stood out to me. It mentions that the Prophet, peace be upon him, his household A&D, his close companions, all refrained from accepting charity. Why would they do that, especially since they were in leadership positions?
It's definitely an intriguing detail, isn't it? There are a few interpretations that scholars have offered. One thought is that they wanted to lead by example, showing the community that even those in positions of authority should strive for financial independence.
That makes sense. Leading by example is a powerful way to instill values in others.
Right. Another perspective is that they wanted to make sure those resources went to the people who needed it most. By declining charity, they were ensuring that the available resources reached those who were truly struggling.
It speaks to their compassion and understanding of prioritizing the needs of the vulnerable.
And then there's also the idea that refusing charity was a way to protect the integrity of their leadership. It prevented any perception of them personally benefiting from those charitable donations, which ultimately helped maintain trust within the community.
So their actions really exemplified self-sufficiency, compassion for the needy A&D, ethical leadership. It's pretty incredible when you think about it.
Absolutely. It really shows the depth and nuance of these teachings and how even seemingly simple actions can carry such profound meaning and purpose.
Okay, well, we've definitely covered a lot about zakat already. It's amazing how this one pillar of Islam encompasses so many important values and teachings.
For sure, zakat is way more than just a financial obligation. It's this spiritual practice that connects us to Allah, purifies our wealth, and strengthens our bonds as a community.
So well said. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface, but maybe it's time to move on to another key practice discussed in this volume. What do you think?
Yeah, that sounds good. How about we explore the world of fasting? That's another pillar of Islam that plays a huge role in our spiritual development, and this volume has a lot to say about it.
I'm all ears. Let's dive in and see what wisdom we can uncover.
Fasting is such a powerful practice, and this volume really dives deep exploring all these different types of fast beyond just Ramadan. You've got chapters 47, 48, 49, 51, 53, 54, 56, 57, 60, all talking about this. It's about so much more than just abstaining from food and drink. It's about building that spiritual discipline, seeking closeness to Allah, and purifying our hearts.
I'm seeing that Volume 2 lays out all these different kinds of fasts, like a whole buffet of options. We've got fasting on specific days of the week, like Mondays and Thursdays, which the Prophet, peace be upon him, highly recommended. And then there are fasts for a certain number of days, like the 6 days of Shawwal after Ramadan, kind of extend those blessings. And then we have fasts tied to particular seasons, like Muharram, the beginning of the Islamic lunar year.
Yeah.
It's really amazing how it provides all these different avenues for spiritual growth.
Yeah, it's like having a personalized fasting calendar. Each type of fast has its own unique purpose and significance, so it allows individuals to really tailor their practice to their specific needs and aspirations. You know what I mean?
It's pretty remarkable. And you know what else stood out to me? There's this hadith about the Prophet fasting most of the month of Shaban, the month right before Ramadan.
Oh, yeah, that one sparked a lot of discussion among scholars. Some take it literally, meaning he fasted almost the entire month. Others suggest he just fasted more frequently during Shaban than any other month, maybe as a way to prepare for Ramadan.
So it's like a spiritual boot camp, getting ready for the big event. It makes sense to gradually build up our stamina and really focus on strengthening our resolve before Ramadan.
Absolutely. It's all about that gradual and consistent growth. But Volume 2 doesn't stop there. It also gets into the nitty-gritty details of how to fast, addressing all sorts of practical considerations.
Oh, yeah. I remember seeing those rulings. Like, what happens if you accidentally break your fast?
Yeah.
Like if you forget you're fasting and eat something.
Yeah.
Chapter 26 talks about expiation and making up for those broken fasts. And then there's the whole discussion about cupping while fasting in chapters 60 and 61.
Cupping, that's a whole other topic, right?
Yeah.
Using those suction cups for healing. There's a question of whether it invalidates the fast.
Well-
So Volume 2 lays out these detailed rulings, taking into account different methods and purposes. It's fascinating how these rulings really dive into the specifics, providing clarity for people who practice cupping. It's like having a spiritual health guide, ensuring we're taking care of both our physical and spiritual well-being.
It's like Islam is saying, hey, we care about your overall health and well-being, even down to these details.
Exactly, and it doesn't stop there. There's also guidance on fasting while traveling in chapters 16, 17, and 18. It talks about whether you're allowed to break the fast while traveling and how to make up for any missed fasts afterwards. It recognizes that traveling can be challenging and offers flexibility for those situations.
That's incredibly helpful, especially for people who travel a lot during Ramadan. But, going through all these chapters on fasting, I've noticed a recurring theme. It's not just about the physical act of fasting. It's about the inner transformation, the purification of our hearts.
You're so right. The intention behind fasting is absolutely key. It's not enough to just abstain from food and drink. We have to have that sincere desire to please Allah, to purify our hearts, and to draw closer to Him. It's about cultivating that mindfulness, controlling those desires, and focusing on our spiritual growth.
It's like using fasting as a tool to transform ourselves from the inside out. There's that hadith that warns against gossiping, backbiting, and engaging in negative behaviors while fasting.
Oh, yes, that's such an important one. It highlights how the true fast is one that encompasses both our physical actions and our spiritual state. Restraining our tongues, guarding our thoughts, and focusing on cultivating positive qualities.
So it's not just about checking off a box. It's about taking this opportunity to do a complete overhaul of our inner selves. And you know what that makes me think of Hajj?
Hajj, the pilgrimage to Makkah. That's a perfect transition. It's often described as the journey of a lifetime. This deeply spiritual and transformative experience that brings Muslims together from all corners of the world to worship Allah as one.
It's a powerful testament to the universality of Islam. And Volume 2 really gets into the nitty-gritty of this sacred journey. It's fascinating to see how much detail and symbolism is packed into every single step.
It's amazing. The volume offers a glimpse into the different facets of Hajj, exploring various aspects that would intrigue anyone who wants to learn more. For instance, it discusses the different types of Hajj, Tamattu, Ifrad, and Qiran, each with its own set of rulings and procedures.
Could you break down those different types for us? I think our listeners would appreciate a little more explanation.
Sure. So Tamattu is when the pilgrim performs Umrah, first the lesser pilgrimage and then does Hajj. They enter Ihram, the state of purity, twice. Once for Umrah and then again for Hajj. with Ifrad, they only enter Ihram for Hajj and don't do Umrah separately. And then Quran is like a combo. They enter Ihram for both Umrah and Hajj at the same time.
Wow, so there's like a whole system to it. It's fascinating how Islamic jurisprudence provides that flexibility, accommodating different circumstances and preferences, making the pilgrimage accessible to people from all walks of life.
Absolutely. It's about ensuring that everyone has the opportunity to experience this sacred journey while still upholding the sanctity and integrity of the rituals.
And you know what else I found fascinating? All those prohibitions during Ihram, like in chapter 18, it outlines all these specific actions that are forbidden while you're in that sacred state, like wearing certain clothes, hunting, and engaging in marital relations.
Right. Those prohibitions symbolize detaching from worldly desires and focusing on spiritual purification, shedding those attachments to the material world and dedicating yourself completely to Allah.
It's like hitting the reset button on your life, stripping away all those layers of ego and worldly concerns and just focusing on your connection with the divine.
Exactly. And there's this interesting story in chapters 25 and 26 about the Prophet, peace be upon him, hunting a wild donkey during Hajj. It seemed to go against that rule about hunting, right?
Yeah, that caught my eye too. What was going on there?
Well, that incident actually delves into the complexities of Islamic jurisprudence.
Hmm.
The wild donkey was causing harm and disrupting the peace of the pilgrims. So the Prophet, in his wisdom, allowed them to hunt it. It highlights this principle of necessity and the flexibility of Islamic law in dealing with those unforeseen situations.
So it's not about being rigid and inflexible. There's room for interpretation and adaptation based on the circumstances. It's about finding that balance between adhering to those core principles and showing compassion for human limitations.
You got it. And that balance is also emphasized when it talks about aligning our intentions with our actions during Hajj. Like in chapters 47 and 96, it emphasizes that it's not just about going through the motions. It's about engaging in those rituals wholeheartedly with a sincere desire to purify ourselves and draw closer to Allah.
So it's about bringing that mindfulness and intention to every step of the journey. Truly experiencing the transformative power of Hajj, both physically and spiritually, and then carrying that transformation on with you.
Beautifully put. Hajj is so much more than a physical journey. It's a spiritual odyssey that can truly reshape our hearts and minds. We return home as renewed individuals, more connected to Allah and committed to living a life of purpose and meaning. And speaking of returning home, maybe it's time we shift our focus to the topic of death and funerals.
It's amazing how this volume seamlessly flows from talking about the outward journey of Hajj to the inward journey of facing our own mortality. It's a reminder that life is a cycle and death isn't the end, but a transition to another realm.
That's such a profound observation. Islamic teachings really emphasize that death is not the end, but a transition to the afterlife. It's the continuation of our spiritual journey. And chapters 7 through 39 provide a ton of guidance on how to navigate those physical and emotional aspects of death, both for the person who's dying and for those left behind.
One of the most touching hadiths I found was in chapter 7. It talks about comforting a dying person. The Prophet, peace be upon him, advised us to reassure the dying person about their faith and remind them of Allah's mercy. It's such a beautiful and compassionate act to offer solace and peace during those final moments.
It's a powerful reminder that even as we face death, our focus should be on strengthening that connection with Allah and remembering His mercy and forgiveness. It's about offering comfort and support to those who are making that transition to the next life.
And then there are all those detailed guidelines on how to handle death practically, like announcing it to the community in chapter 12 and preparing the body for burial in chapters 15, 16, and 17. It's incredible how these teachings offer guidance for even the most sensitive and practical matters.
They provide this framework for honoring the deceased and making sure their transition is handled respectfully and with dignity according to Islamic principles. It helps the family and the community grieve and find closure in a way that's both practical and spiritually meaningful.
And even within that grieving process, there are different perspectives presented on crying over the deceased in chapters 24 and 25. It acknowledges those natural human responses to loss while also reminding us of the Islamic guidelines about excessive displays of grief.
It's about finding that balance between allowing ourselves to feel those emotions and maintaining composure and dignity in the face of loss.
It's about channeling our grief in a way that's cathartic and spiritually beneficial. And then there's that really poignant hadith in chapter 36 about building a house in paradise called a house of praise for the parents of a child who's passed away. It speaks to that profound grief of losing a child, offering solace, and reminding us that our loved ones aren't truly gone, but waiting for us in the next life.
It's a beautiful and comforting thought. highlighting that even in death, there's hope for reunion and eternal happiness.
Yeah.
It emphasizes the importance of patience and faith in the face of hardship and acknowledges the pain of loss while also offering a glimpse of those rewards that await those who endure with steadfastness.
It's like even in death, there are lessons about living a life that pleases Allah. It's a bittersweet reminder that our time here is limited and we should make the most of it, by striving to live according to His will and appreciating every moment.
It encourages us to be mindful of our choices, to align our actions with our values, and to strive to leave behind a positive impact. And you know what else this makes me think of? Marriage and family.
Another stage of life that Volume 2 explores in depth. It's amazing how it covers practically every stage of human existence, offering guidance for navigating each one.
It really speaks to the comprehensiveness of Islamic teachings. It addresses not just rituals and beliefs, but those practical and social aspects of life, too. It's about giving us a holistic framework for living a fulfilling and meaningful life aligned with Allah's will.
It's like this guidebook for living a life of purpose and meaning, helping us navigate those tricky human relationships and fulfill our responsibilities as individuals, family members, and members of the community.
Exactly. And chapters 1 through 43, along with 114 through 119, cover a huge range of topics about building and maintaining a strong family life. You've got marriage, divorce, raising children, and even that unique Islamic concept of suckling.
You know what I found really heartwarming? There's this hadith in chapter 10 that advises a newly married man to host a feast, even if it's just with one sheep. It highlights the importance of celebrating that union, bringing the community together to share in the joy.
It emphasizes that marriage is this blessed occasion to be celebrated and shared with loved ones, even if it's a simple gathering. It's about starting that new chapter together, surrounded by love and support.
It's about prioritizing those connections and fostering that sense of community right from the start.
Mm.
And then there are those more complex topics like wali guardianship in marriage, especially when it comes to orphans. Chapters 19 and 20 discuss the responsibilities of guardians and ensuring that marriages are conducted fairly and in the best interests of everyone involved.
Right. There's this strong emphasis on protecting those who are vulnerable and upholding their rights, especially in matters as significant as marriage. It's about making sure those decisions are made with wisdom and compassion, putting the well-being of all parties first.
It's about creating a system of support and accountability, making sure that marriage is entered into with careful consideration and a sincere commitment. And speaking of commitment, Volume 2 doesn't shy away from the topic of divorce either. Chapters 16 and 18 address divorce during menstruation and emphasize that divorce should be approached with seriousness and careful consideration.
It reminds us that even though divorce is allowed in Islam, it shouldn't be taken lightly. It has a huge impact on everyone involved. So it's about recognizing the gravity of that decision and trying every other avenue before resorting to it.
It's about preserving the sanctity of marriage while also acknowledging the realities of human relationships and those challenges that can arise. And then there's that unique concept of zihar, which is mentioned in chapter 19.
Oh, yeah. Zihar is when a husband compares his wife to a forbidden relative, essentially saying she's unlawful to him. It's a serious matter, and the volume outlines its implications, including the rulings and expiation required.
It really highlights the importance of respectful communication in a marriage. Avoiding hurtful words and actions that can damage that bond. It's about recognizing the power of language and using it responsibly to build a loving and respectful environment.
It encourages us to be mindful of our words and actions, ensuring they reflect the love and respect that should be at the heart of every marriage. Remembering that marriage is a partnership built on mutual respect, understanding, and a shared commitment to upholding Islamic values.
And it seems like this emphasis on ethical conduct, responsibility, fairness, and clear communication is woven throughout the entire volume.
It's about building that strong and ethical foundation for the family unit, one that's grounded in those core Islamic principles and values.
It's about recognizing that the family is the building block of society, and its well-being impacts the entire community. It's about starting that ripple effect of positive change from within the home and extending it outward to the world.
Beautifully said. Our personal choices, our interactions within our families, and our commitment to ethical behavior, they all have a ripple effect. They shape not just our own lives, but the fabric of our society.
Wow, expert speaker, we've covered so much ground today. It's amazing how much wisdom and guidance is packed into this one volume. It's like a treasure trove of insights that are still relevant for us today. And we're back for our final deep dive into Sunan al Tirmidhi, Volume 2.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
It really has, and I'm ready to unearth even more treasures from this amazing text. Last time we were talking about family ethical conduct and building a strong foundation based on Islamic values.
Right. And it's amazing how Volume 2 touches on pretty much every aspect of life, giving us guidance for both our spiritual practices and our practical day-to-day living.
It's like this holistic roadmap for living a meaningful life,
Hmm.
where every aspect is interconnected and guided by Islamic principles. It's incredible.
Hmm.
So where do we go from here? What other gems are waiting to be discovered?
Well, how about we explore the world of voluntary prayers? Chapters 605 through 610 delve into their significance and offer a deeper understanding of the blessings associated with going above and beyond those obligatory prayers.
Voluntary prayers are like those little extra steps we take to strengthen our connection with Allah. Those moments of quiet contemplation and devotion that nourish our souls.
Exactly. And these chapters highlight that even though they're not required, they hold immense spiritual value. They give us a chance to deepen our relationship with Allah, express our gratitude, and seek His blessings.
It's like going that extra mile demonstrating our love and devotion through those acts of worship that go beyond what's mandatory.
And, there's a beautiful hadith that describes voluntary prayers as a loan to Allah, one that He promises to repay with even greater blessings. It's like those acts of worship are precious gifts to Allah, and He's committed to rewarding us generously for our efforts.
It's so reassuring to know that every act of worship, even those we choose to do out of love, is acknowledged and cherished by Allah. It really encourages us to approach our worship with sincerity and intention, knowing that even small gestures can have a big impact on our spiritual well-being.
Speaking of intention, let's move on to the chapters on purification, chapters 611 to 615. These hadiths provide all these detailed guidelines on performing wudu or ablution, emphasizing how crucial it is for both physical and spiritual cleanliness.
Wudu, the ritual washing of our hands, face, and feet before prayer. It's fascinating how this simple act of washing carries so much spiritual weight.
It's about purifying ourselves both internally and externally. Preparing ourselves to stand before Allah in prayer. It's a symbolic act that cleanses not just our bodies, but also our hearts and minds, allowing us to approach prayer with that sense of reverence and purity.
It's a reminder that true worship should involve our whole being, body, and soul.
Absolutely. And these chapters really stress the importance of having the right intention behind our actions. Making sure we're performing wudu mindfully with a sincere desire to cleanse ourselves for the sake of Allah.
Not just going through the motions, but infusing even the most routine actions with spiritual awareness.
Exactly. And that awareness should extend to the way we treat others, too. You can see this in the hadiths about wiping over leather socks in chapters 616 to 620. They explore the conditions for wiping over socks instead of washing the feet during wudu, offering flexibility and ease for people who might find it difficult to wash their feet frequently.
It's amazing how Islamic jurisprudence seeks to balance adhering to principles with recognizing human limitations. Acknowledging that not everyone has the same physical abilities or circumstances, and providing practical solutions to help people fulfill their religious obligations.
It's a beautiful reminder that Islam is a religion of mercy and ease.
Right. It's about finding ways to make things accessible and manageable without compromising those core values. And that sensitivity to individual needs is also evident in the chapters on menstruation and postnatal bleeding, chapters 621 to 625.
Those hadiths lay out specific rulings for women during those times, recognizing their unique experiences and offering guidance on how to maintain their spiritual practices while honoring their physical needs.
It's a testament to how inclusive Islamic teachings are, recognizing that diversity of human experience and providing guidance that's both relevant and compassionate.
And that sensitivity extends beyond ritual purity to include physical well-being, too. For example, the chapters on cupping, chapters 606 and 627, explore the rulings on cupping while fasting.
Cupping, that ancient practice with the suction cups. It's interesting how these chapters address the concerns about cupping's effect on fasting, seeking to balance spiritual principles with a scientific understanding of the body.
Right. It's a recognition that our bodies are gifts from Allah, and caring for them is part of our religious duty.
Yeah.
So these rulings offer guidance on maintaining our physical health without neglecting our spiritual obligations.
It's about finding that harmony between taking care of our physical selves and our spiritual selves, recognizing that both are essential for a balanced life.
Speaking of balance, what about those chapters on hospitality, chapters 628 to 632? They emphasize how important it is to treat guests with generosity and kindness, recognizing that providing food and shelter is an act of worship that brings countless blessings.
Hospitality, a cornerstone of Islamic ethics. It's about extending that circle of care beyond our immediate families to include those in need, even complete strangers.
It's about creating this culture of welcome and generosity, recognizing that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. These teachings encourage us to open our hearts and homes to others, sharing our blessings and building those strong community bonds.
It's a reminder that we're all part of one big human family under Allah.
And that sense of responsibility extends beyond our interactions with humans to encompass our treatment of animals, too. Chapter 610 includes a hadith where the Prophet, peace be upon him, forbids the mistreatment of animals, emphasizing our duty to care for all of creation.
It's like saying our compassion should have no limits, recognizing that we're entrusted with caring for the earth and all its creatures.
Exactly. Islamic teachings highlight our responsibility to treat all living beings with kindness and respect. Recognizing that we're all interconnected in this delicate ecosystem that depends on our care.
It's a beautiful, holistic view of life, valuing compassion, justice, and balance in everything we do.
And that's what makes studying Sunan al Tirmidhi Volume 2 so enriching. It's not just a set of rules, but a guidebook for living a meaningful and purposeful life, grounded in faith, compassion, and ethical conduct.
It's a reminder that even the smallest actions can be acts of worship if we approach them with the right intention.
Precisely. Our journey of faith is a lifelong process of learning, growing, and striving to embody the values and principles Allah has revealed to us.
Wow. What a perfect way to wrap up our deep dive into Sunan al Tirmidhi Volume 2. It's been an incredible journey exploring this timeless text and discovering its relevance for our lives today.
We hope you've enjoyed this exploration as much as we have. And remember, the pursuit of knowledge is a beautiful thing. We encourage you to keep learning and growing in your faith.
And as always, if you ever need a companion on your journey, feel free to reach out. We're always here to share in the joy of discovery with you. Until next time, may Allah bless you with knowledge, understanding, and the strength to lead a life that's pleasing to Him.